said last year, it was the Vikings who ruled this division as they won. They went 13-4, famously labeled as frauds, as they also did lose in the first round to the New York Giants. So not a great look. As we mentioned, in regards to departures, they let go of Dalvin Cook. Also lost wide receiver Adam Thielen and tight end Irv Smith Jr. And on the defensive side of the ball, they lost defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson, linebacker Eric Kendricks, and cornerbacks Chandon Sullivan and Patrick Peterson. And then addition-wise, they brought in defensive coordinator Brian Flores, and then a couple of cornerbacks and Byron Murphy from the Cardinals and cornerback Joe Juwan Williams from the Patriots. Also edge rusher Marcus Davenport from the Saints, and then linebacker Troy Reeder, who is with the Rams. And I think, if I remember correctly, was with the Chargers last season. I forget. I know he's with the Rams. And then draft-wise, first round, they went out and grabbed wide receiver Jordan Addison out of USC. And in round 1, pick 23. And then round 3, grabbed cornerback Mekhi Blackman, also out of USC. And round 3, pick 102. So, yes, as I mentioned, we both kind of felt they were fraudish last year. Definitely lost some key pieces. What are your thoughts on the Vikings offseason heading into this year, John?
The Vikings offseason, I think, is an interesting one because I don't think that the team overall really changed much. Like, obviously, you lose Dalvin Cook, but Madison had showed, the capabilities of being solid in the past. You lose Thielen, and he was a very productive receiver, but you add Addison, and I think that he could potentially even, match Thielen's, initial production or, be better than what Thielen offered last year as your second receiver. Then now you get a full year with TJ Hawkinson, so I think that's exciting for the team. The offensive line, once again, just certain guys like Christian Darrisaw, Ed Ingram getting older, getting better. There's still some question marks around Danielle Hunter, I think, right? Like, I think he's maybe potentially wanting to be traded or there was rumors of him being moved. Actually, wait, no.
I remember seeing those.
Hold on. Apparently he got a contract extension.
Okay, so probably, trying to get contract buffer. And
it was a 1-year contract extension of up to $20 million. Okay. He gets 17 guaranteed, and there's $3 million sack incentives. So, but I don't know how long his deal is, but regardless, I guess that means he's staying. Point is, I think the Vikings can still be a team that, can be solid. The one addition that I really did like was Byron Murphy Jr. from the Cardinals. Because, I wasn't a big fan of their secondary last year. Obviously, Patrick Peterson, he's all right, but I think he's more, the name value is better than the production at this point in his career. And I think that Byron Murphy's pretty solid. So I like adding him, and I like adding Brian Flores because I do think back to when he was, in Miami. I think that he was getting a lot more out of, that defense than maybe they had talent-wise. Not saying they weren't talented. They obviously had some studs like, Xavier Howard, for example. But I do think that he was making that defense a very, very solid unit that was able to be relied upon. So I think that he could potentially do the same and really get the maximum out of this unit. That said, I mean, we talked about this team in the past, and you talked about the whole fraudulent thing. And I mean, listen, last year they won 13 games, and I think 11 of those 13 wins, or no, I think it was 12 actually, were 1-score games, and some of those were 8-point wins. So I mean, that's technically still a 1-score win, but it's a little different than, I guess, a touchdown. Regardless, a vast majority of their wins were 1-score games. And we've seen historically when teams like that have that happen and they have such a one-sided win-loss percentage in those kind of contests, usually it doesn't replicate that. Either they actually improve and they don't have as many 1-score contests the next year, or they continue the same exact trend and they have a lot of close games, but they start to lose some of those. The example of that is the Raiders, right? Like 2 years ago when the Raiders made the playoffs over the Chargers in that final game, everybody's freaking out because they could have gone for the tie or whatever, which wasn't going to happen. But point being, the Raiders made the playoffs that year. They were the team that had won like all of their 1-score games. All of their wins were basically 1-score wins. And then the next year, this past season, they don't end up making the playoffs, and we see the opposite is happening where they're competitive, but they're losing. And I worry that could happen with the Vikings, just because overall, like I said, I don't feel like the team has really changed a ton. In terms of like their grand scale in the league, I think certain position groups do change a lot. For example, you lose Eric Kendricks, one of the better linebackers in the league. I mean, yeah, you have Jordan Hicks, but I think that's a downgrade there. But then you upgrade at corner. So I think it kind of evens out, I guess. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure how to feel about the Vikings. I think they could improve dramatically if certain young pieces that they've drafted over the years. I'm talking about Lewis Sine, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, the safety, Andrew Booth Jr., the corner, Ed Ingram at right guard. If we have certain young pieces like that who can really develop and prove to be key contributors, then we could see them improve. But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they're just, once again, a competitive team, but maybe we see some of those results go the other way.
Yeah, I'm with you in regards to I think they'll obviously not be 13-4. Probably around 500, maybe above 500. Obviously, the offense is going to be the main focal point of carrying them. I'm excited also for a full year of Hockenson being integrated into the system. We kind of saw him finally be utilized and get the volume that he kind of deserved in Detroit. But Detroit, the timeline didn't really fit. But nonetheless, I wasn't that high on Addison, but I think he could still be a really good number 2, especially to Justin Jefferson. And like I said, if Hockenson can keep kind of build off what he did at the end of last season, as technically a third option, he could probably be very good on top of Alexander Mattison and maybe doing more in the receiving game. It'll be very interesting, though, the defense, because I do like Brian Flores. I'm with you. He is part of that New England type guys like the Vrabel and Belichick, where they tend to get more out of their defenses, even if they don't have a bunch of marquee names or high investments in them, especially at linebacker and defensive back, and even interior defensive line. So that would be interesting because feel like one of the issues with the Vikings was their defense, as you alluded to, was not very good last year. It was really reliant on their offense, and I mean, even if you remember some of those games, like you talk about all the one possession games they won. I mean, remember the Colts game? They should have lost that game, but the Colts absolutely just blew it after that incredible first half. And then the Bills won too. It took a fumbled snap and a crazy, amazing Justin Jefferson catch for them to win that game. And I'm sure there are other examples as well. Just things that are hard to replicate, moments that are hard to guarantee happen again. And I know turnovers are always fluky, but I expect this team to still be a contender. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, as much as crap as everyone gives him, and the criticism he gets, still a solid quarterback. And we've seen, as long as the offensive pieces are in place, mentioned Darisaw great at tackle, and if the run game, even we saw last year, the run game wasn't as effective, especially late in the season. They were able just to throw their way out of games. So yeah, I expect this team to still be competitive, but and probably be competing for the NFC North title at the end of the year. It'll just be interesting to see, like you mentioned, some of the younger pieces, what they can get out of them. Can Brian Flores get a lot out of Andrew Booth Jr., a guy who I was high on coming out, didn't get to do much last season, and Lewis Sine as well, a highly regarded safety, kind of a raw safety, but obviously played at Georgia, high pedigree, high talent. Can they utilize him? And we'll see if they can get anything out of the linebacker position. Like you mentioned, losing a key piece in Eric Kendricks, but it is Brian Flores from New England, and they do typically know how to get the most out of their linebackers. Typically, even if you go with Vrabel, and hit the linebacking core there in Tennessee, and obviously Belichick in New England. So it'll be very interesting to see if the Vikings can be better than they were last year in theory, or at least match that level of play and be competitive. So, and obviously not lose in the first round to the Giants, because that definitely was a bit of a sour end to their season nonetheless. So, which is crazy too, because if I remember correctly, they were like in contention for the 1 seed going into that last week, and I think they needed some things to happen. But nonetheless, that is the Vikings. They were the sole team last year in the AFC North to make the playoffs. So